Good evening and welcome to the City of Oxnard Planning Commission regular meeting for Thursday, July 21st, 2022. A quick housekeeping item as shown on the agenda and online, please email all written public comments to planning@oxnard.org. And those wishing to speak during the meeting may do so in person or virtually. For in-person speakers, please submit your speaker card to the Commission Secretary. For virtual speakers, please view the bottom of your screens for the call-in number, meeting ID, and passcode. If you dial in only, you may press *9 to raise or lower your hand. If you are using the desktop Zoom app, you may use the raise hand feature. You may also submit your request to speak by visiting oxnard.org/city-meetings by 3 p.m. the day of the meeting. Because the meeting is electronic, all votes will be done by roll call. We'll now move to our Commission Secretary to establish our quorum.
Chair Chavez,
Here.
Vice Chair Wejo,
Here.
Commissioner Meyer,
Here.
Commissioner Nash,
Here.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Here.
Commissioner Lopez, and Commissioner Connolly is absent, and we have a quorum.
Thank you for that. We'll now move to our next item, which is our Pledge of Allegiance. And Commissioner Nash, would you mind leading us this evening?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Thank you. Seated.
Thank you for that. We'll go ahead and proceed to our next item, which is public comments for items not on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission regarding any item not on the agenda, but within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission may do so at this time. However, the Commission cannot take action on any item presented during public comments and will be referred to the Commission Secretary. All public comment speakers will have 3 minutes. Madam Secretary, just to confirm, we did not have anyone sign up?
Chair, we do not have any speakers for public comments not on agenda.
Thank you. So at this time, we'll go ahead and proceed to our next item. Sorry. Nothing's listed on the consent agenda. And we'll move to our ex parte declarations public hearing items. And we'll also note that Commissioner Dr. Lopez had joined us. Vice Chair Rejo.
I have none, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. Thank you, Commissioner Dr. Lopez.
None. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Nash.
None. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sanchez.
None.
Thank you. And for myself, I actually had a conversation with Councilman McDonald referencing item F1. He expressed some concerns, and at no point during that conversation did he persuade me to vote in any direction. So with that, we'll go ahead and proceed to our first public hearing item, which is item F1. Project name is Umesh Retail Pharmacy Special Use Permit. This is planning and zoning permit number 22-520-01, special use permit minor. This is located at 1200 North Ventura Road, Unit G. A request to operate a community retail pharmacy within an approximately 1,281 square foot vacant medical suite within the commercial office plan development zone. Proposed development includes minor interior tenant improvements, a front retail display area, reception counter area, and high-density storage shelving for medicine. The proposed pharmacy will operate daily between the hours of 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. The proposed project is exempt from environmental review pursuant to Section 15301, existing facilities of CEQA. This is filed by Umesh Manglani, I apologize, property owner and operator of the proposed pharmacy. Our city staff person is Juan Carlos Torres, assistant planner. The recommendation to the Planning Commission is find the project to be categorically exempt from CEQA guidelines pursuant to Section 15301, existing facilities, and adopt and approve a resolution 2022-XX approving planning and zoning permit number 22-520-01, special use permit subject to certain findings and conditions. As a reminder to the public and my colleagues, a pre-recorded staff presentation is available on the city's YouTube channel. We'll now turn to our city staff if they have any comments on this item.
Chair Chavez and commissioners. So I just want to introduce Juan Carlos Torres. He's one of our newer assistant planners. He's been with the city for about a year now. So he's been primarily helping out at the counter and processing a lot of the smaller permits here at the city. Been doing a great job at it so far. So happy that he's here, and I will let him take over and go through the project. And then also to introduce Steve Ramirez. He's also in our department now. He's going to be overseeing the firearms, alcohol, cannabis, and tobacco with the city, working in connection with Scott Swinson. So Scott Swinson is still going to be here, but Scott Swinson was out on vacation today. So we have Steve joining us for this meeting.
Great, welcome.
Good evening, Chairman Chavez and members of the Planning Commission. Do you guys have any questions for me since I'm, fairly new here for the city of Oxnard?
Commissioner Nash.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mr. Torres. I just have one thing I'd like you to clarify for me on the first page of the resolution. If you go down to point A, where it talks about location, classes 3, 4, 5, 6, and 11 are qualified by consideration of where the project is to be located. Could you educate me on what that means?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Because it's kind of hard to.
So yeah, on the first page of the resolution, under point A, it reads location, classes 3, 4, 5, 6, and 11 are qualified by consideration of where the project is to be located. And I don't know what that means really.
What's that?
Jump in. So I can jump in on that one. So that's referring to the categorical Sql exemptions. So there's classes 3, 4, 5, 6, and 11. Those are called out here because while they are a categorical exemption, they may not apply in certain circumstances if there's basically if the project would ordinarily be insignificant, but due to its location, it would be significant. So that's really what that's getting at. So the numbers there refer to the categorical exemptions under CEQA.
Okay, so under the categorical exemption, there's a whole list of.
Yeah, there's 33, I believe.
Yeah, there's different
We
qualifications.
just never see that, so I was wondering why it was brought out this time.
And I'm sorry, at the beginning when I was asking is if you guys had any questions for me, because I'm fairly new for working for the city of Oxnard, but since we're going to go into the project, we actually have some last minute changes to one of the conditions of approval for the project. In which the applicant, the police department, and also the planning department has agreed to those changes. If you go to the condition number 30 for this item, and I'm going to read the modifications to this condition as follows. Pharmacy transaction area shall be secure utilizing the following features. Letter A, a plexiglass glazing wall or door barrier system that provides floor sealing and protection. Letter B, the door shall be secured by key or access control mechanism or system. Letter C, building plan submittal shall identify the specific products to be used in the construction of the barrier system. Letter D, determination as to whether the construction of the enclosure meets or exceeds this condition shall be determined by the chief of police or his or her designee. And so those were the changes that we actually have for that condition. Again, we're here for the police department and as well the applicant and myself are here for any questions.
I'm sorry. Is there a way that we can bring that language up on the screen so that we're able to?
So Chair Chavez, just to kind of maybe explain, unfortunately, we don't have it to bring up here, but essentially in conversation with the applicant, the police department and the planning department, we determined to remove the requirement that the barrier system be bulletproof or bullet resistant. So the condition was essentially just changed to remove the requirement that it be bulletproof or bullet resistant, but still require that there is a barrier there. So there would still be some type of separation between the patrons of the pharmacy and the workers there.
Thank you for that clarification. Any additional questions in regards to the application? Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Chair. So just for clarification about why that change was it made to align better with the requirements for other pharmacies that don't have bulletproof barrier requirements, or what was it?
Yeah, I think Steve will be able to answer that for you guys.
Good afternoon, Steve Ramirez, Oxnard Police Department. I've been here about 20 years, so I know a couple of you. I know Mr. Nash, Mr. Lopez. I've yet to meet you gentlemen, but I'm sure we'll be speaking very soon. But just to address Mr. Meyer, your question, in previous instances where there have been pharmacies developed, the level of security of the using the bulletproof glass has not been in effect. So on this case, I think what Scott was trying to do is kind of increase the level of security at that location, because where it's located, he takes a look sometimes at the Part 1 crimes within that area to see what type of activities occurring, whether it's burglaries, whether it's robberies, if there's any violent assaults, is there any gun violence or anything that's occurring there that might need that level of security there. I think he did run into some statistics there that had that, but then he at the direction of the chief of police, after being directed to take a look at the location once again and the plans and totality, he said that and as well as the chief of police felt that, yeah, it didn't need that level of the bulletproof, but it still needed that barrier in order for people who possibly might be looking to commit a crime at that location and jump over the counter to steal those types of narcotics, which we do have within several locations around Ventura County, not specifically Oxnard, but other jurisdictions. It's very common for people to just jump over and then commit a robbery, stealing those types of narcotics. So they wanted that barrier there, and the type of barrier which was it changed to would meet the specifications with just having that barrier there, not allowing anybody to jump over that counter, get access to those medications, and at least provide ample time. So if somebody did try to, like, say, come in and use a mallet, come in and use a hammer to break those things, it would provide enough time for the persons, whether they're still working at the time, contact police, and for us to have an immediate response to that location to address any of those issues that were occurring.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Okay.
Ramirez.
Any additional questions from Vice Chair Rejo?
Thank you, Chair. In regards I have two questions. The first is in regards to camera system, it doesn't specify if they're inside and outside or just inside. If you could clarify or confirm that. The second is I would think there would usually be a plan for loading and unloading of I've seen before, like if it's a bank or financial facility, that there would be some type of plan. Is there something similar in regards to these types of drugs? That's partially curious, but partially on a security matter, since you did bring up the possible stealing inside. So I'm just wondering about the outside. Thank you.
Regarding the video surveillance system, so if we look at, I think it's going to be, look at condition 31, subsection G, and it speaks about cameras being mounted strategically, capturing the head and shoulders of persons who enter. So we want those at the entry and egress points. It should say there, where are we at? All entry doorways to the premises. So when we have that on the entry door, it should be capturing as people enter. So it will, you're talking about the exterior. You want specific information or language regarding cameras that will be posted on the exterior of that building? Is that what you're asking?
Not necessarily, but I just wanted to know that there's at least some type of camera system pointed towards the outside.
I
And you
don't-
did confirm that. So you did say at the entry and egress of those who enter. So I assume the camera would have to be pointing outside, or would those cameras be inside?
At that time, I can't answer. Can you answer that?
Commissioner Rejo, so from working with Scott in the past on these systems, typically they are in both locations. So there'd be an interior one to capture people coming in, and also one on the exterior to kind of see people as they're moving around the building.
Thank you very much.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Sanchez?
So according to the number 7, community workshop and public input on April 18th, there was a community workshop. And according to this, the developer sent out 800 agenda notices, and there was 10 people actually that joined the meeting. And according to this, at the meeting, nobody had any questions or expressed any concerns or opposition to the project. Since then, has there been any other by mail or anything like that concerning this?
To answer to the question, Commissioner Sanchez, we had not received any opposition to the project since then.
Thank you.
And to answer the question to Commissioner Arrejo, as far as the loading zones, this project was originally approved the way that it is right now. What they're only doing is change of use. But as far as the type of loading, we can also refer to the applicant to see what type of deliveries they actually get for this type of use.
Any additional questions? I just had a couple of questions, Mr. Torres. Conditions of approval number 21. This is in the staff report. It says under the planning division special conditions, number 21, it says permittee or property owners association shall upgrade the existing trash for compliance with ordinance number 3007 and shall include a solid cover that prevents stormwater from entering the refuse bins. Now, here's the confusing part for me. That one, I feel, kind of competes with condition number 28 under stormwater quality conditions. It reads that the permittee shall construct double bin trash enclosures, one for recycle use with a solid non-combustible roof that prevents stormwater from entering the refuse bins. Developers shall construct all other components of the trash enclosure in accordance. And I won't read the whole thing. So please clarify this for me. Condition 21 and condition 28. To me, when I look at condition 21, it tells me that either the permittee or the property owners have to make the necessary upgrades. Whereas condition 28 tells me that the permittee will construct a brand new trash enclosure. Now, is that only for their use or is that the use for the entire property?
To answer the question, Commissioner Chavez, as far as the condition number 21, the way that it's written on the condition, it could be either the property owner or the owners association doing those improvements. As far as the planning department, whoever submits, as far as this project, we don't really get into the details of who's going to be paying for that. We just want those improvements to get done as part of this permit. In regards to condition 28, we should include as well, owners association right at the beginning to be consistent with the condition number 21. And as far as the rest of the condition, not necessarily they have to construct a new trash enclosure, but they can modify the existing one that they have as long as they have a solid cover and metal gates.
So essentially, condition 28 is the same as 21.
Correct.
But for whatever reason, we decided to put them both there in different languages. Also, I'm very curious, and I forgot which condition it was, but there was a condition that says that at the commencement, if one of the conditions aren't met during the whole process, that the permit could be null and voided. Because we as a city aren't getting into the details of who exactly pays for the trash enclosure improvements, what if both parties, the permittee and the property owners association, both say, we don't want to pay for it?
Unfortunately for this one, they can, because of the condition, and this is coming from an ordinance that was written by and approved by the planning commission as well. We are required to comply with, this ordinance. So therefore, if they were not to not comply with this condition of approval, I guess we can, that will be something that we either the conditional use permit will be denied, or if there is a different solution that we can work with them, we can obviously talk to the property owner, and I will talk to my supervisor and see if there is something in common that we can actually get into to get this going.
Mr. Roselle?
Yes, this is a required condition of approval. So if the HOA refuses to pay for it, then the permittee has to do it. Otherwise, they cannot go forward with this project.
Okay. I will save the other comments for later on that one, but going back to condition number 30, this is in regards to the glass and the security barriers. Officer Ramirez, just a couple of questions in regards to this. The reason why we're saying that we need to have essentially a full body length from floor to ceiling for a barrier is because we believe that crime could be higher for this type of business.
Well, there is a belief, yeah, but there's actually instances where the actions have occurred, the crimes have occurred. You're just doing target hardening. So the main purpose of this is to harden that target, to make them not susceptible to those types of crimes, and those types of crime as being susceptible to robberies, susceptible to people jumping over to try to commit these types of crimes. So by having that barrier in place, it's the original, it's an initial deterrent, right? Visibility. I probably am not going to get over there. I'm probably not going to be able to defeat that window. And if they're, I don't want to say if they're hard set on getting through that, well, then it's going to give the employees there the safety of not being assaulted by somebody, maybe who might be under the influence or who might be desperate to get those types of narcotics. Give them the ability to contact the police and stay behind those barriers. So it's just for safety purposes for everybody, including the employees of that business, as well as the rest of the citizens in the immediate area, because citizens who are going to frequent that location are going to see this as well and know, like, yeah, you know what? I kind of do feel safe coming here because I know people aren't going to target this location because they probably know they're not going to get and defeat that barrier there.
I appreciate that. There's no rear door access to this building, correct? There is. Okay. Is there any conditions in regards to the type of doors that are supposed to be in the rear? I don't know if I don't
see any that he's put in place for the only thing that mentions the door is the door that's going to secure the narcotics area from the floor sales area, but nothing specifically for that rear door.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm pretty familiar with all those buildings in there, but like most of those doors are, solid metal doors on those exterior of those buildings there. Very difficult to defeat, especially when you have one of the plates along the door locking mechanisms, but I'm sure they'll have excellent security there at that location.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question as far as the security for what is the term, whether it's narcotics as a generalized term or substances that are highly desirable to be trafficked.
Prescription medications.
Yeah, prescription medication, opiates, et cetera. I know that at some pharmacy locations they have combination locked or other specialized storage for those kinds of prescriptions and items to provide additional security, but I didn't see anything specific in here stating, is there additional security for those kinds of items above and beyond standard?
We on these police, we don't have any of those special conditions. That might be something that might be spoken with the owner or the person with that property, because it's not like a Bond's pharmacy, a Ralph's pharmacy, independent pharmacy, and their regulations regarding how they handle how they handle the prescription drugs and how are they going to secure them, what system they're going to utilize is probably incumbent upon them.
Yes, would the applicant care to speak to that?
Yes.
Thank you, respective panel. Thank you, sir. I've been a pharmacist for 16 years and sorry, I'm a little emotional today. I wanted to open my own pharmacy. And this is my first opportunity. I have limited amount of income for what I'm going to put towards this. I have a living for my family. My thing is, I don't want to be overburdened with all these requirements because I only have so much money I can do it with. Or I'll have to just call it a day and go back to what I'm doing right now. Right now, I work for an independent pharmacy in Ventura. We had a break-ins. I'm not saying no, but we never had a break-in the daytime. And which location I am trying to open a pharmacy. I have worked at the Rite Aid 24 hours over there for 5+ years, and I had never had problems with the pharmacy getting robbed or stolen over there. And this is a pretty safe area. And I don't mind working with the police department to get it secured. What I'm requesting is that the plexiglass, instead of that, we can maybe do a metal grill, so I can talk to my customers and communicate better. And, with the glass, it's very difficult. Sometimes you have to bend down and talk, and I don't want to be giving any additional burden to them. And the remaining part is all drywall. And the doors, they are really good quality wooden doors, and they're solid, they're heavy. Even to lift them out is really hard. The locking mechanisms on them, they are the old school ones. They're very solid. And I don't mind putting extra locks or extra, doors to slow them down. This is what we've been doing in our pharmacy. So we have additional barriers. And then we have the most important thing is a safe. So we have a DEA approved safe. In that safe, we lock the medications. And the only medicine that comes out is what we are dispensing, and it straight goes back in the moment we finish the work. So it's very difficult for you to break in there and try to even drag that heavy safe out, because the DE has specific requirements for those to meet. And I don't think it's going to be that easy for you to jump over and do those things, but I don't mind having a barrier over there. And I'm willing to work with the department.
I think also, sir, Mr. Arahu had a question earlier regarding the delivery of the medication.
Yes. So the delivery of medications normally comes to the back door. And the Board of Pharmacy requires that the door be locked at all times and only allow the driver when he comes in to let him in. So regular people, nobody's allowed to come from the back door other than the delivery driver. And once that guy is in, the door is immediately locked in, and then we take the medications, put them where they're supposed to be. If it's a controlled medicine, it goes in the narcotic cabinet and it's locked up. And these are devices that have their own protection that DEA implements. So, and they are very difficult for you to even go through, and they are very thick plated metal, it's not possible for you to even cut it. It'll take you 2 hours to go through that. Even with the best devices you have to cut it through. And they're so heavy, you can't drag them out. Even if you get a pickup truck and break through it. And these will be bolted down to the floor, so it'll be very difficult for them to do anything like that. And I'm not going to disclose anywhere in my pharmacy where these things will be inside. I'm not putting them on your plan at all, so you don't even know where it is. So it'll take you even longer to do that. And each door in that building is again a solid wooden door. All doors will be locked, going all the way to end. So it will slow you down so much that there'll be enough time for the police department to come and do a proper response and get hold of them. Most of the time, these things are happening in the night, like after 10 o'clock to morning 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. And that location, I don't mind putting cameras in there, and I'll put the max camera that I can, which will allow the police department to view the front, outside, inside, and they will know what vehicle came in, what the license plate. I'll try to do as much as I can on that part. You know, the camera system itself is like $15,000. It's not cheap. The bulletproof they were asking me to put earlier, that's around 20 grand right there. And the double bin enclosure was going to cost me 20 grand. So I'm looking at like $70,000, $80,000 just in bare costs. And after that, bear the cost of the medications, my staff. So it just becomes financially impossible to do. What I'm doing is a plain plea, you know, be fair to me. And regarding the double bin trash enclosure, it's a HOA area. Outside, I'm not allowed to touch. I can only change the walls inside. If you read the in the rules of the HOA, it clearly says that outside the walls, it's their part. They are responsible for everything, and I just pay my dues, that's it. Now, they are claiming that this is a grandfather thing for them, and they don't want to pay for it. And I'm being asked to pay undue burden for it. And there are 11 people over there, and I was the only one who's triangulated to pay for it, which is not fair to me. And the next thing I wanted to point out is, in that same location, in 1999 and 10 years before, actually 15 years before that, all that part was, there was a pharmacy already in that location. The city went and changed the zoning to COPD later on, and that's when I got stuck over here in this kind of a thing. I would have never had to go through this at all if they would have left it with an open thing where I could put a pharmacy in there. And there was a pharmacy. There was a pharmacist over there. He ran it for a long time. He never had problems. He finally retired and he sold his business. That's what he did. It was a very safe location. I don't see any problem over there. But I don't mind working with the department as long as you be fair to me. I want to, my pharmacy is going to be very unique. I'm going to have a compounding in there. So if tomorrow somebody's kid is sick and they cannot take the medicine, I'll make it in a way that it can be done, you know, in a cream form or something. I'll take care of your pets. I'll have compounding for pets. I'll have compounding for people who are, you know, at the last stage of their life and they're throwing up and they can't take any medicine. I can do all that stuff. I'll even do DME. I just want you to be fair to me.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have any questions for the applicant?
And this is my first business. I don't want to be like, you know, disheartened.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any additional questions for either the applicant or city staff? No. At this time, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing for this item. Madam Secretary, just to confirm, we did not have anyone sign up for this item.
Chair, we don't have any speakers at this time.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and close the public comments for that item. And we'll bring it back to the commission for deliberations on this item. Any deliberation comments? Commissioner Nash.
Thank you, Chair. I'm ready to make a motion, but I think you had some more comments to make. So when the time comes, I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Comments? Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. I think it's just important for the applicant to understand our role in making sure that we're supporting the oversight around make sure that the project is compliant. And we're not in a position to look to add expensive requirements on top of what is already required. We're just trying to make sure that the project is compliant and is prepared for safe and successful operation. And And so that's what our questions are in relation to.
Any additional, Vice Chair Rejo?
Thank you, Chair. I think the main thing, at least for me, in regards to the pharmacy was in regards to the safety features. And, it's not the same apples to apples comparison, but just based on other pharmacies where they're inside the store, I believe that this project has even more security features than normal, and that I believe just based on the permit, as long as it's followed through, will be safe for both the permittee and the residents around. So I'm prepared to support this when the motion is put forward to this body. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? I'll just say real quick is that when looking at the conditions for this particular item, I completely agree with you, sir, that I find it completely inappropriate that a permittee is required for making upgrades to a property, especially when there's an HOA. That's supposed to be the oversight. I don't believe it's appropriate when there are multiple tenants and only one tenant is required, but it's not like you're going to go out there and lock the trash enclosures to prevent those other tenants from using it. The only concerns that I would have is in regards to the double conditions 21 and 28. I believe one of them has to be removed because I believe they both are saying the exact same thing to prevent stormwater from getting into the trash enclosures. The only issue is that condition 28 doesn't say HOA, it just says the permittee is responsible. I don't agree. Now, understand when Commissioner Meyer touched briefly on this of our role, but it's also our role to look at how the impact of this project, of this application is going to affect for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. My concern is that we could be potentially setting the wrong precedent when we're saying that there has to be some type of security barriers for all pharmacies or for specific type of businesses moving forward. Looking back at other pharmacies like CVS, Walgreens and stuff like that, even the small mom and pop pharmacies, they don't have those barriers. The Walgreens, there's 2 locations that I'm aware of that do have barriers, but every other pharmacy is open air. So I found it odd that we would, on a small pharmacy, put this type of condition. I'm pleased that there was some conversations going around to reduce, I guess, the threat level for the glass, that it isn't the most extreme one, but it still concerns me just because of the fact that there's already going to be panic buttons. And I'm assuming there's going to be multiple panic buttons. But that worries me. So I have the concerns with those conditions with the trash enclosure. I have the concerns with condition 30, subsection A, when it talks about the barriers. And I would, if we were to keep both conditions 21 and 28, that 28 does put the property owners part of that condition, that we add them to that. Now, unfortunately, I have not seen any of the language into this ordinance that was passed by the, ordinance number 3007. I have no language on that, so I don't know exactly what it says. But I share your frustrations about that. You're a small business trying to come up and you're already getting hit like if you've been in business for 15, 20 years. It's unfortunate, but these are the things that happens. Something new comes along, it triggers a whole slew of issues. But I do want to see more conversations with this particular project because I believe there could still be more fine tuning so that all parties can agree. And again, Mr. Roselle, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The city, it's not the city's responsibility or even prerogative to get into the details between the owner and their tenants. Whatever agreements that they have or policies, that's on them, correct?
The requirement is that they, when there's a change in the use, there's a requirement that the trash can be upgraded to the current standards. It is my understanding, based on conversations I had with various parties involved, that the HOA has refused to do so. Hence, it would fall on the permittee. But in the end, the trash enclosure needs to be upgraded. That is being triggered by this new use coming in. So if the HOA refuses to, then the permittee would need to do so, so it can be compliant with our current code, as well as various regulations of regulatory agencies, because the water going in the trash cans can cause other issues that need to be addressed. And this project was built 50 years ago. Standards are very different half a century ago. So if we don't impose it on this project, then it's not going to happen for another 20 years or 30 years. And that's a kind of environmental issue that needs to be addressed. And the city actually has to impose these requirements when they have the chance to do so. So that's the problem. We understand this is not cheap, but development unfortunately is expensive.
Absolutely. The permittee made comments that the HOA has rules that says that they're responsible for everything outside of the tenant space.
Well, in this situation, though, this is a requirement to meet current regulatory standards. So this is something that can be done. My understanding was the HOA didn't say they didn't want to pay for it. They were not opposing it as long as they didn't have to foot the bill.
Got it. All right. Thank you. Any additional comments? Commissioner Dr. Lopez.
I thought this was going to be a little bit easier, and it seems like there's a little bit of a gap, to fill here. Certainly understanding not wanting to impose undue responsibility cost on an applicant, but like Mr. Roselle said, is being triggered at this time simply because of the change that's needed or required. I'm not quite sure where the other commissioners are or where Mr. Nash was with his motion that he was prepared to do. I just feel that, we're not quite there yet. And I'm not quite sure if this is something that's time sensitive, obviously, to the applicant to open up and start your business. That is an urgency. But I would want to see if there's any way we can move closer together in terms of revisiting whether it's the plexiglass barrier or some other alternative that may work. I'm not quite sure if that's even something that's up for discussion or debate here. If it's not, it's not. If it is, and it would be something that staff and the applicant feel that there is still progress to be made, I would encourage that just to get to maybe that final polish that Chair Chavez was maybe alluding to. But that's where I'm at right now.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Chair. So if I understood correctly, the bulletproof plexiglass requirement has been rescinded. And I'm not perfectly clear on what the new language is, because it looks like we need to update that language in the resolution, and also looks like it may be appropriate to revisit 21 and 28 to make sure we don't have duplication or conflict between the two items.
If I could clarify, the modification to condition 30 was to change it from bulletproof glass to plexiglass. So there still would be a physical barrier, but it would not be the more expensive bulletproof or bullet resistant. So it's the basically, thick plexiglass, which is much less expensive than bullet resistant. So that was still, so there'd still be a physical barrier for someone jumping over, but it wouldn't necessarily protect against someone who wants to, shoot through it. But for the vast majority of people, the who want to jump over and grab narcotics, it would keep them from doing so. So that was the intention there, but it would still be a physical barrier, but it would not be bulletproof glass.
Okay, so it would have to be plexiglass and thus not what the applicant was mentioning and some sort of a metal alternative?
That is correct. It would still be plexiglass. And as the condition was read, when Carlos Torres was reading, he was modifying the bulletproof language to talk about plexiglass instead.
Okay, so council, that would be, we're going to modify that in the condition of approval if that is the direction we're headed?
That was staff's recommendation.
Okay.
And then if it's a desire to combine 21 and 28, or I think because the enclosure already exists, so the issue is to put the lid on top. Is that correct?
Commission, yes, that is correct. The main purpose here was really to put the roof on the enclosure. There's an existing enclosure out there. However, as Ken mentioned, it was developed a while ago, so there wasn't a roofing requirement at the time. So what we're looking for today to kind of bring that into conformance is to add the roof structure to that.
So based on that, 28 could be deleted. And so I think that's probably the best way to address Chair Chavez's issues which were raised. So that would address that issue. Then staff's recommendation regarding condition 30 would still be to substitute the bullet resistant glazing to plexiglass. And I believe that would address some of the issues raised by the commission.
Can I also address some issues that Mr. Chavez brought up, specifically related to, and we talk about, undue fees or the police department does not want to add, increased fees or construction. Our goal is to be a partner with the business owners to ensure that the safety for the business owners as well as the citizens in the immediate neighborhood are safe, right? Everybody's safe. They don't have access to those types of medications, but at the same time that they're not victims as well as a store. I think the big thing that we also need to understand here is this is going to be a neighborhood pharmacy, like right in the neighborhood. And then I'll speak to you guys, are all residents of Oxnard, so you know where this location is. It's on a frontage road next to several apartment complexes, accessible through alleyways. And I'll tell you this, I come right now from working the streets. My previous assignment was as the homeless liaison coordinator. And so what that did is I dealt with all the homeless related from crime issues, but also served as a liaison for housing for the homeless. But I know, and I would get weekly calls from the business owners in that specific area, that corridor from the 1000 block off of Devonshire all the way up to Gonzalez Road. There's plenty of narcotics use that are occurring along that business corridor there, in the apartments, in the alleyways. So the dynamics of this is it's not a big Rite Aid that's away from houses and apartments. It's not a Walgreens that's away from the business, usually in a large shopping mall, retail mall. This is closer to that neighborhood. The proximity is different. He talked about there previously being a pharmacy there several years back. Was it 10, 15 years, sir? In 2000s. Okay, so the times change, right? Times change, crimes change, the types of drugs that are out there, proximity to where his business will be now. So when we say times change, back then, they didn't probably need the plexiglass. At this time, they do, because of the proximity to the area in which it's being going to be developed in. It needs that added security for both himself and the residents in the immediate area.
Any additional comments? This time we'll look for a motion for this item. Commissioner Nash.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. And I hope that all of the commissioners' questions and concerns were answered. I had to laugh when Commissioner Lopez made his comment about nothing's ever simple. I thought this was a pretty straightforward proposal, but I was proven wrong. So I move that we find the project to be categorically exempt and that we adopt the the resolution allowing the change to condition number 30 by substituting bulletproof plexiglass for the bulletproof glass. And that we delete condition 28. I think that was what staff said. And I do think it is important that we continue to adhere to the current environmental standards of 2022, and trash enclosures can be very problematic. So I don't think we should back away from that, and that's my motion.
Thank you. Is there a second? Commissioner Meyer. It's been moved and seconded to find the project to be categorically exempt from environmental review pursuant to California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to Section 15301 existing facilities, and approved a resolution 2022-XX approving planning and zoning permit number 22-520-01 special use permit subject to certain findings and conditions, with the modifications to condition of approval number 30 subsection A to remove the language of bulletproof resistance glass and replace with plexiglass, and to remove condition number 28. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing and hearing none. Madam Secretary, can we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Nash,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Owejo,
Aye.
Commissioner Dr. Lopez,
Aye.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Yes.
Chair Chavez,
Aye.
motion passes.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and proceed with our next item, which I'm assuming will be easier. Project name is 538 Meta Street Property Disposition General Plan Conformity. This is planning and zoning permit number 22-625-03. This is located at 538 Meta Street. A request that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution affirming that the City of Oxnard deposition of real property located at 538 Meta Street is in conformance with the City of Oxnard 2030 General Plan, and recommending that the City Council order the deposition. The site is located within the 2030 General Plan land use designation of downtown and is zoned downtown general in the City of Oxnard. The Planning Commission's determination of whether the proposed deposition of the city's subject property is consistent with the Oxnard 2030 General Plan is not a project for purposes of CEQA and state CEQA guidelines 15061B3 and section 15378. This is requested by Emilio Ramirez, Housing Director, on behalf of the City of Oxnard. City staff person is going to be our interim planning and environmental services manager, Mr. Pearson. And the recommendation for this is that the Planning Commission find the project to be exempt from environmental review pursuant to CEQA guidelines 15061B3 and section 15378B5, and adopt a resolution 2022-XX affirming the City of Oxnard's deposition of real property located at 538 Meta Street is in conformance with the City of Oxnard 2030 General Plan, and recommending that the City Council order the deposition. Mr. Pearson.
Chair Chavez and Commissioners, I don't have anything to add here, but I'm available if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the Commission? Commissioner Nash.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. And I know I've asked this question before, but that won't stop me from asking it again. Under the notice of exemption, we have a statutory exemption when normally we have a categorical exemption, and that is because this is simply the sale of a property and it's not associated with the project. So that makes it a statutory exemption.
Yes. So Commissioner Nash, there's two types of exemptions essentially under CEQA, and there's statutory and categorical. So statutory exemptions, such as this one, is just where a project wouldn't have an impact on the environment under CEQA. So in this case, this is essentially the Planning Commission is saying that the transfer of the property is in conformance with the general plan. So there's no development being taken under this project before the commission today.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Seeing and hearing none, we'll go ahead and open the public comment for this item. We have one speaker on this, Ms. Pat Brown.
I am the neighborhood chair for the Maida Street property. My neighborhood runs along the east side of Oxnard Boulevard from the 3rd Street Bridge way down in past Saviors and all of that, and it goes way down. Anyway, along the east side of the boulevard, I'm it. And I'm just wondering, this particular little oblong piece of dirt that is blocked in on two sides of it. So it's just at an intersection is what it is at, and it's not big enough to build anything onto it. You'd have to take the piece of property, the house and whatnot that's been there for years and years and years. It's a good sized property. You have to take that, put that with it, and then you might be able to build something on it. But just that little piece by itself isn't worth maybe 5 cars parked there as a guest parking lot, maybe. That's about as big as it is. It's useless property. And at one time, when the Cabrillo Economic Development built the apartments that are across the street from there on Maida at 6th Street, those have 2-car garages and they're very nice, 2-story, and they have a good sized playground area in the middle of all of it for their children and whatnot. So, and parties and all kinds of activities go on there. And I can't imagine what they would think, because they wanted to grow some vegetables there, do a little vegetable garden on this little square piece of 538 Maida. And Cabrillo Economic Development had some kind of a test done on the property, on the soil, to see if it was good enough to plant and have a garden for these little kids to grow up and learn how to garden. And they said, no, you have to bring in boards and make boxes on the property. And then when the boxes are there, then you fill them up with good soil, and then you can grow product in those boxes, wood boxes. So we did that, but it was a watering problem and so forth. So eventually, I think we just went through one season of it and gave it up. And then eventually the boxes were taken out. But what that soil is underneath there, I don't know. But what I was told was there were a lot of chemicals. And during World War II, the people were looking around for places to dump chemicals. And big containers of them. And that was one of the spots. That's one rumor that I heard, but I wasn't around here then, so I have no idea. But I just want to know what's going to be done with this property. What other property is it going to be connected to in order to do anything with? And I would like whoever's going to be doing this, somebody from the city, as well as the developer, whoever's going to do developing, I'd like them to get a hold of me, at least by phone, or I could meet them up at the property and they could show me what they're planning on doing. But just to say, what is it good for? That piece is not good for much of anything. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Commissioner Secretary, just to confirm, we did not have any additional speakers.
No, we don't.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and close the public comment for this item, bring it back to the commission for any additional questions or deliberations on this item. Vice Chair Rejo.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. So I see this disposition as quite simple and it's in furtherance of a possible mixed-use project. It does look in conformance with the general plan. So in the future, I hope that it's going to look as it is done in the general plan. And at this time, I move to find the project exempt from environmental review pursuant to CEQA guidelines 15061B3 and 15378B5 and adopt a resolution affirming that the city of Oxnard's disposition of real property located at 538 Meadow Street is in conformance with the general plan and recommending the city council order the disposition.
Is there a second? Commissioner Dr. Lopez. It's been moved and seconded to find the project to be exempt from environmental review pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines 15061B3 and section 15378B5 and adopt the resolution 2022-XX affirming that the city of Oxnard's deposition of real property located at 538 Meta Street is in conformance with the city of Oxnard's 2030 general plan and recommending that the city council order the deposition. Is there any discussion on that motion? Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to comment that this is a minor and maybe not totally clear piece to the public about why, if they didn't read in detail what we're looking to do here, but this is related to affordable housing development that will be executed by many mansions that'll include a paseo and a community pocket park. So while this sounds very dry, this is part of what is leading to that, which will be a benefit to the public and to our housing needs. So I'm glad that we are slated to move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, Madam Secretary, can we have the roll call, please?
Vice Chair Wejo,
Aye.
Commissioner Dr. Lopez,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Nash,
Aye.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Yes.
Chair Chavez,
Aye.
motion passes.
Thank you. Before we move into our next item, all right, we'll go ahead and take a 5-minute recess, and then we'll reconvene for that last item. Thank you. All right, good evening. So we're going to be reconvening back to this Planning Commission's regular meeting. We are now going to proceed to item F3, which is the project name for apartments at River Park. This is planning and zoning permit number 19-200-16. This is located at 2700 and 2750 North Ventura Road. This is an appeal of the Community Development Director's approval of a DDRP for the construction of a 409,215 square foot, 5-story apartment building with a 333 residential units and a 6-story, 171,066 square foot, centrally located parking structure with 510 residential parking spaces, rooftop deck on a 4.23 acre project site. The 333 residential units encompass 44 studio apartments, 166 one-bedroom units, 116 two-bedroom units, and 9 three-bedroom units. The project is located again at 2700 and 2750 North Ventura Road within the commercial general land use designation and River Park specific plan zone. The proposed project has been found to be consistent with the RPSSP and FEIR number 00-03 and therefore exempt from further environmental review pursuant to section 15-162 of the Sql guidelines. The project application was filed by Jonathan Cornelius. I apologize. For property located, our city staff person is Joe Pearson II, interim planning and environmental services manager. Recommendation to the Planning Commission is to find the project to be consistent with the final environmental impact report and subsequent addendums prepared for the River Park specific plan and therefore exempt from further environmental review pursuant to sections 15-162 through 15-164 and 15-183 of the Sql guidelines, and adopt a resolution denying the appeal and upholding the Community Development Director's approval of planning and zoning permit number 19-200-16, subject to certain findings and conditions because the record shows that there is evidence necessary to make all the findings required by the city code. At this time, we'll go ahead and move to our interim planning and environmental services manager, Mr. Pearson.
Thank you, Chair Chavez and commissioners. So as you guys have received throughout the day, there's been quite a few comment letters that have come through from both the appellant, the applicant team, as well as APCD, which was provided to you guys on the dais and is available here. So in light of those letters that were kind of provided, we wanted to prepare a brief presentation essentially to kind of go over the issue before the commission today and the issue brought up in the appeal and kind of provide a little bit of background. So we can kind of go through that and then we will then proceed with the rest of the meeting, including the presentation from the appellant and the applicant team. If that's okay, I will continue with the presentation. So just to start out, the appeal request, the appeal was for CEQA issues. The applicant is stating that the city's proposed CEQA review is inadequate because the project was not analyzed in the River Park specific plan EIR and addenda, and the project specific impacts generated by the proposed project must be analyzed in the mitigated in the project level EIR. Essentially, the applicant is stating that the CEQA, or they're challenging the CEQA that was prepared for the for apartments at River Park. So just to provide a brief summary, as you mentioned, the project is a request to construct a 5-story, 333 unit apartment building on a 4.23 acre site. It includes 333 units. It includes 50 affordable units, which is required under the River Park specific plan, which again requires that 15% of the units be affordable. And that project came before the Planning Commission at the end of last year and at the early part of this year as well. There would be private open space for the residents, and the parking structure will be centrally located, and there would be 510 parking spaces. And again, there would be some other hardscape and landscape improvements associated with the project as well. To provide a little bit of background on the actual River Park specific plan itself, the original plan was adopted back in 2002. That plan allowed for the development of approximately 2,805 dwelling units and 2,485,000 square feet of commercial development. There have been 7 previous amendments to the River Park specific plan that have been approved since its original adoption. The most recent one was the one that, again, came before the Planning Commission at the end of last year, and was approved by the City Council on April 5th of this year as well. That plan, or the current plan, which is in effect, would allow for the development of up to 4,068 dwelling units, or approximately 2,098,000 square feet of commercial development, depending on the development options chosen. And if the commission recalls back to the specific plan that came before them, there was various development options. So in both districts B, C, and D, there was an option for both commercial or residential. So depending on which option was chosen would depend, or would identify what the resulting square footages would be under the maximum build out. In conjunction with the adoption of the original specific plan, the overall specific plan and its build out was analyzed through an environmental impact report, or EIR number 0003. Potential environmental impacts associated with the project were identified throughout the EIR, and applicable mitigation measures were put in place to make sure that all the impacts were being mitigated to the maximum extent feasible. The EIR found 4 areas of significant impacts, which required overriding considerations, and that was earth resources, mineral resources, water quality, agricultural resources, and cultural resources and historical resources. Since that time, there have been 15 prior addendums to the River Park EIR that have occurred over the years. Again, the most recent addendum that was prepared was the one that was associated with the specific plan amendment that came before the commission and was approved by City Council on April 5th of this year. And that addendum, as I would touch on a little bit later, identified the development of the 4 properties site with 333 units or an alternative of commercial space. However, the property owner has chosen to move forward with the apartments project. Other developments which have been developed in River Park have also relied on the River Park final EIR. So similar to this project, additional environmental review was not conducted, as they did rely on the project EIR, which was prepared for River Park. Again, to kind of go into some more detail on addendum number 15. Again, addendum number 15 was a modification to the approved final EIR. The addendum evaluated potential environmental impacts of the build out of the currently adopted River Park specific plan, which, as I previously mentioned, included the development of up to 333 units in District B of the River Park specific plan. The addendum evaluated each of the development options, which was outlined in both the specific plan and the addendum, and determined that there were no additional impacts associated with the change that was taking place. And again, the project, or the addendum itself, analyzed the changes between the original project as modified, so the previously adopted addendum, and the proposed project options. So essentially comparing the difference between the EIR as amended under the previous addendums and the project being proposed under the specific plan amendment, which came before the commission at the end of last year. For all of the issue areas, the addendum concluded that the project would not result in new or substantially more severe impacts than those identified in the prior EIR, with the incorporation of the previously identified mitigation measures. All the mitigation measures remain applicable, and these mitigations are applied to all projects developed under the specific plan and the final EIR, which includes the projects or the 4 apartments project, which is before you today. And in the conditions of approval, there are those mitigation measures identified. Pursuant to CEQA guidelines, a notice of determination was filed on April 7th, following the April 5th approval of the River Park specific plan and addendum. And pursuant to the CEQA guidelines, once the notice of determination has been posted, that begins a 30-day statute of limitations on legal challenges to the addendum. That challenge period ended on May 9th, and no legal actions were filed to challenge the approval of addendum number 15 to the EIR. Essentially, that ends the time in which somebody would be able to challenge the city's environmental process that it conducted. So essentially what staff is recommending to the Planning Commission is that since the project is consistent with the River Park specific plan, it falls under the final EIR and the subsequent addendums, or it falls under the environmental documentation that was prepared for those for the River Park specific plan. And so as long as the project is essentially consistent with the specific plan, it is covered by the EIR that was prepared for that specific plan. And so therefore under CEQA, it would be exempt from further environmental review pursuant to the sections identified of the CEQA guidelines, and then adopt a resolution denying the appeal and upholding the community development director's approval of the permit subject to the findings and conditions, because again, as the record shows, that there's evidence to make the required findings as required by the Oxnard City Code. And that's all for my presentation. And so the next step here would be to allow for the appellant to go through the process. Essentially, the outline moving forward the appellant is going to be given 10 minutes to make their presentation. And then they can save that time to respond to the applicant's presentation. The applicant will also have 10 minutes to speak to the commission. And then again, if the appellant chooses to reserve any of their 10-minute speaking time, they would then be able to follow up after the applicant. Once the appellant has provided essentially their rebuttal, should they choose to do so, then we would continue with the normal procedures for the public hearing. So if you have any other questions, or we can turn it over to the appellant to begin their process.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. I think we'll go ahead and go to the appellant, and I'll just ask the appellant if they would like to reserve any time, or would they just want to speak and then whatever time's left over.
Yeah, I'll if that's okay, I'd like to just speak, and then I imagine there'll be a few minutes left over.
Okay. So at this time, we'll turn to the appellant for 10 minutes. They will be recognized.
All right. Thank you and good evening, commissioners. My name is Rebecca Davis, and I represent the Appellant Supporters Alliance for Environmental Responsibility. Tonight, we're here to urge the city to grant our appeal and overturn the Community Development Director's decision approving this project and finding it consistent with the 2002 programmatic EIR for the River Park specific plan. Legally, we think the city's consistency determination is inadequate. The project was not analyzed in the 2002 EIR, and the project-specific impacts generated by the current project have to be analyzed and mitigated in the project-level EIR. We submitted extensive written comments, including comments by 3 experts. And while I don't have time to cover everything today, I'm going to just highlight a few of the reasons that we think that the project requires an EIR. First, because the city previously prepared a programmatic EIR for the River Park specific plan, the proper procedure under CEQA is to tier off of that EIR and prepare a new EIR if there is substantial evidence of a fair argument that the project may have a significant impact that was not previously analyzed in the 2002 EIR. And we submitted substantial evidence that the project will have significant impacts on biological resources and significant human health impacts that have not yet been analyzed or mitigated under CEQA. And while we don't believe that the CEQA guideline section 15126 is applicable, even if it were, a supplemental EIR would still be required because our comments include substantial evidence that there have been significant changes in circumstances since the prior EIR, and as a result, the project would have new and more significant environmental impacts. So I'm going to turn to a discussion of the project's impacts on biological resources. From all of the documentation, including the addendums, it appears that no new biological survey of the project site has been conducted by the city since 2002, when the EIR was certified. Our wildlife expert visited the site and observed 23 species of wildlife, 4 of which are special status species. And our expert, Dr. Smallwood, concluded that the project will adversely affect these species. This is clearly new information because the 2002 EIR states that there are no special status species on the site. And the court, in a case called Mira Mira Homeowners Association versus the County of Ventura, held that discovery of special status species on a project site after the EIR stated that there were none is significant new information requiring a supplemental EIR. The fact that there were not previously special status species on the site, but that there are now, is just one of the many ways in which circumstances have changed and new information has become available since 2002, when the EIR was certified. And as a result of those changed circumstances, the project will have new or more significant impacts on biological resources than were previously analyzed. For example, the environmental setting has changed from a wide expanse of open spaces to an island-like patch of disturbed ground, mostly surrounded by development. And wildlife has substantially declined since the 2002 EIR as a result of cumulative impacts that have become more significant over the last 20 years. In addition, more species have been assigned special status due to widespread habitat loss over that same time. Our letter includes numerous other changed circumstances and new information indicating that the project will have a significant impact and an EIR should be prepared. Next, the 2002 EIR and addendums don't contain any health risk assessment to determine how the project will impact the health of nearby sensitive receptors. Dr. Paul Rosenfeld of the environmental consulting firm SWAPE submitted comments that the project will create air quality impacts above the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District significance threshold. SWAPE performed a health risk assessment using the methodology prescribed by OEHA, and Dr. Rosenfeld concluded that as a result of the diesel particulate emissions and other pollutants associated with the construction and operation of the project, it's expected that the project will create an excess cancer risk of 70 cases per million people for infants, an excess cancer risk of 55 per million for children, and an excess cancer risk of 138 in a million over the course of a residential lifetime. These all exceed the Air Pollution Control District's threshold of significance, which is 10 excess cancer cases per million people. This is a significant impact that was not disclosed, analyzed, or mitigated in the EIR. In addition, there are many new mitigation measures available to reduce air quality impacts that were previously deemed significant and unavoidable by the 2002 EIR. For example, Tier 4 construction equipment was not available in 2002, but it is now and would dramatically reduce the project's construction-related emissions. Finally, the EIR does not consider an analysis of the project's health impacts from emissions in indoor air. We submitted expert comments of Francis Offerman, one of the world's leading experts on indoor air quality, who concluded that the project is likely to expose future residents to an increased cancer risk from indoor air pollution of 112 per million, largely as a result of long-term formaldehyde emissions. This is more than 11 times the significance threshold. And Mr. Offerman's comments are substantial evidence supporting a fair argument that the project may have a significant impact that must be analyzed and mitigated. These and other impacts discussed in our letter require analysis under CEQA prior to project approval. So to conclude, we urge the city to grant our appeal to find the project not to be consistent with the 2002 EIR and instead require staff to prepare an EIR for the project before approving it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and have the record reflect that you stopped at 3 minutes and 45 seconds. Do you wish to reserve that time?
Sure, thank you.
Okay, we'll now move to the applicant on this item and be recognized for 10 minutes.
Good evening, honorable commissioners. My name is Andrew Fogg. I'm a land use attorney with the law firm of Cox, Castle and Nicholson. And we are here on behalf of 4 Property in opposition to the appeal. We also have with us Tony Locacciato, who is with Meridian Consultants, who submitted a letter today. And he'll speak to some of the more specific items that were raised in the letter that was submitted late yesterday evening. As a preliminary matter, though, the appellants are just wrong on the law and the facts in multiple respects. They keep referring to the 2002 EIR as a programmatic EIR. They are wrong. In section 3 of the EIR, page 38, the EIR goes into the intended uses of this EIR. And it says, the EIR is intended, this is a quote, the EIR is intended to serve as a project EIR as defined in section 15161 of the CEQA guidelines for use by the city of Oxnard related to the actions contemplated therein. It's a project EIR. It's been a project EIR all the way through. Every addenda that has been prepared has treated as a project EIR, and the city has consistently, for every project that's been improved in River Park, has relied on this project level EIR for its review. They're lying to you when they say it's a programmatic EIR. That's wrong. The other comment that's made, and this is carried through, the appellant just noted it, they say that there were significant unavoidable impacts to air quality. This is incorrect. At page 4.8-24 of the EIR, it concluded that with the imposition of all mitigation measures, all of which are still in effect, as Mr. Pearson noted, that there were no significant unavoidable impacts to air quality as a result of this project. Again, they're misleading you. When the specific plan amendment was approved, the city prepared an addendum that reviewed all components of this project and found that there would be no new significant impacts and there would not be an increase in the severity of any impacts that had been previously identified. And it adopted an addendum, and that is your environmental baseline. That's what applies to the decision going forward. We're not looking back to 2002. We're looking at 2022, the EIR as updated through the addenda that have been approved from time to time. So there's no new information here. There have been no changes. There are no impacts. Under section 15162 of CEQA, the standard for review is there a new significant impact as a result of the project changes, or is there a substantial increase in the severity of significant impacts? There haven't been, because what you just approved 2 months ago is what applies. And there have been no changes since that addendum was adopted by the city. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Locacciato to address some of the more specific questions that they raised.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm Tony Locacciato, partner with Meridian Consultants, resident here in Oxnard, 5202 Outrigger Way. I've had the pleasure of being the city's primary environmental review consultant on this since the project was first proposed. So over 20 years ago, prepared the original EIR and a majority of the addenda that have been prepared, including addendum number 15 that was recently reviewed and approved. As Mr. Fogg said, it's a project EIR. All the project analysis was updated in each addendum, including an update on the existing conditions, the changes in conditions That's updated prior to considering the change in impact. So each addendum has fully updated as relevant to topical analysis in the EIR. So the record you're relying on is up to date in all aspects. There were 3 areas, technical areas that were commented on in the appellant's letter. I also like to mention that since this is a project EIR with full update, it's the substantial evidence standard under CEQA that applies, not the fair argument standard as applied by the appellant here. So the city's conclusions are based on the substantial evidence in the record, the EIR plus the 15 addendum. The appellant's information they've submitted doesn't equal that or constitute substantial evidence of a potential impact. With regard to biological resources, their expert is in agreement with the information addendum 15. This site previously graded, highly disturbed, covered by weedy vegetation and species. Now they say it could serve as upland habitat that has some value because it's near a migration corridor in our Santa Clara River. But as you know, this site is separated from the river by 4 lanes of Ventura Road, by the raised Army Corps of Engineers Santa Clara levee. There's no physical connection between this site and the river. There's a 150-foot separation at the south end from this site and over 350 feet at the north end. Now, they say they're expert observed species. They kind of mix and match here. The majority of those were birds. On site, the species they observed were common lizards, rabbits, and gophers, which are what you would expect on any disturbed site around. They're not sensitive species. Sensitive species may be present in the Santa Clara River. They're not present on the site. The site doesn't have habitat suitable to support sensitive species. So there's no evidence they've supplied that development of this project on the site would result in significant impacts to biological resources. With regard to indoor air quality, their expert cites his own studies and information regarding the fact that there's formaldehyde in some materials used in interior construction and that those materials off gas. Well, yeah, we've provided information they off gas within a year or two. They're expert based on saying, if you have a very small apartment with no ventilation, this stuff can really build up. But health risks are taken into account over a 70-year exposure period. And there's regulations on these materials that require minimum levels of these materials. So in all, the information they've provided doesn't add up and doesn't support a conclusion that there's potential human health risks from indoor air quality from use of certain types of building materials, which they don't know are going to be used in this building and nobody's specified yet. With regard to human health risk and diesel particulate emissions, concentrations of those, they had somebody do some air quality modeling, but we've reviewed that modeling. There's a couple problems with their modeling. It doesn't reflect the project. For example, when you use the Cali mod emissions model, if you just put in the square footage of a project, it assumes a construction schedule. Well, the construction schedule the model defaults come up with is a little over 400 days. The applicant has an actual construction schedule. It'll take 973 days to build this project. So they're trying to pack all that activity into a much shorter schedule, which makes the emissions go up. That's not going to occur. The project's going to take over twice that period to build. They've also assumed that construction phases that are in that standard model aren't going to occur. They've included equipment and emissions for demolition. This site is vacant. There will be no demolition of existing buildings. So it's another way their modeling is incorrect, driving up those numbers. And their modeling also assumes the site's 3.8 acres when it's 4.2 acres. Again, more activity in a smaller area, shorter period, that makes the emissions go up. But when you look at the actual characteristics of this project, the emissions will occur at a lower level over a longer period and will not be in excess of the air district significance threshold. So all in all, on all 3 of those points, the information they've submitted doesn't constitute substantial evidence or even frankly a fair argument that there's potential significant impacts that have not been evaluated in the city's environmental review documents. In addition, there was a letter submitted by the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District. It actually doesn't have any comments, has some recommendations. When projects are built within proximity to high volume roadways, you do need to look at air quality, make sure there's adequate filtration. The city's conditions of approval already address this. The air district isn't stating that any additional analysis is needed. They're just recommending the city consider these factors, which the city has already considered in their review and approval. Hope that information is helpful for your deliberations this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're available if you have any questions, and we urge you to deny the appeal. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and put 3 minutes and 45 seconds on the clock. And for Ms. Davis, you can go ahead and respond as soon as you see the clock return back to your screen. 3:45. Are you able to do that?
40. I can't do the 45. It only.
Okay.
I won't need,
Oh,
I'll
13.
be less than that, so.
Okay. You can go ahead and respond.
Okay, I will be very brief and just respond to a few points. Our biologists did observe special status species at the project site, and special status species include special status species of birds that are rare and protected by law. On the indoor air issue, our expert took into account that the materials would be CARB compliant with the regulations, and determined that even using those materials without proper ventilations, the emissions will exceed the threshold of significance, as we stated in our comments. And overall, we just ask you to take the time to review our comments and make your determination based on the evidence that we've provided. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We'll go ahead and turn back to Mr. Pearson as far as the next steps in this process.
So if there's any questions, we can address those at this time. Otherwise, we can move forward with the public hearing portion.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Commissioners will open for questions. Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I had an opportunity to decently review the back and forth between the applicant and the appellant regarding the EIR. Is it programmatic or project, as well as are there substantial impacts that were not considered? I think maybe what was more where I have questions was in regard to the VCA PCD letter, which to clarify that there are actually 5 areas of significant environmental impact, adding in air quality. So that's something that you noted, Mr. Pearson.
Commissioner Meyer, so what they're defining is slightly different than what we're looking at. So there were 4 areas that were unmitigatable. With regards to impacts, however, as previously mentioned, air quality was mitigated to a less than significant level. So while without mitigations, it would have been significant, under the EIR, it was mitigated to a less than significant level. So that's why it wasn't included in the 4 that were identified in our report.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Okay, so then the item number 2 on that letter, relating to there being some lack of clarity as to whether the toxic impacts were addressed. And it looks like maybe APCD is lacking confirmation that they have documentation to support that or clarify that. It was in relation to updates to the guidelines in 2003 after the EIR was completed, and changes in relation to sensitive land uses within 500 feet of a freeway. So that part was a little confusing to me So I'm wondering if you have some clarity about have subsequent addenda actually address that and any updates to APCD guidelines or regulations around air quality.
So I guess maybe take a step back. The basis kind of our environmental documents are the city's CEQA guidelines. So those guidelines have been updated. I can't remember the exact date off the top of my head right now, but I believe it's 2017 or 18 when those were updated. So when a project comes before the city and we analyze it under CEQA, we are using those CEQA guidelines. So it would be based on the current CEQA guidelines that the city has adopted. So it would be updated to basically whatever the city had adopted at that time.
Okay, so what you're saying is those guidelines should then reflect, or our CEQA update should reflect what the current guidelines are, or at least up to through to 2017?
Yes, that'd be correct.
Okay. All right. It looks like from my reading that there's maybe not clarity as to whether a health risk assessment was performed. But it seems to be suggesting that the mitigation measures that would be recommended if one are in place, like the MERV 14 filtration systems. So then I guess the other pieces would be questions around the recommendations that they had, those 5 bullet points. How does the project compare, or are those addressed in the project? Or if not, are those items that are items that could be addressed, are reasonable to consider being addressed?
So Commissioner Meyer, some of them have been, such as there's vegetation along the perimeter of the project. Some of them I would probably defer to the applicant to go through, as they're more familiar with the actual construction of the project itself. So I don't know if Jonathan, you want to kind of go through some of the items here, and if you need the
point of order, Chair, or a point of information, Chair.
Vice Chair Rejo.
Are we able to ask questions of the appellants and applicants? I was under the assumption that we're only supposed to ask staff, or is staff just punting off this question just for this, or just punting off this to the applicant just for this question?
I was under the impression that it's all 3 staff, appellant, and applicant that we're able to ask questions of.
That is correct. It is, this was in result, Vice Chair Aware, this is a result to a specific question. So staff does not have the specific details regarding the project itself. So the applicant has the ability to indicate if the project as designed, along with the conditions of approval, are addressing these issues which have been raised by the air quality agency.
So to clarify, is the commission able to ask questions of the applicant and appellants directly then?
Yes, that can be done. And that is actually, once the time clock has run out for, in this case, the applicant and the appellant, the only way that they can speak is if it's as a result of a question from members of the commission. Otherwise, where public hearing has closed, there's of course no public to speak. And so now it's brought back to the commission for the deliberations and questions. So you can absolutely ask questions of staff, the appellant, or the applicant.
Okay, acknowledged. Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Yes, Chair Chavez and Commissioners, yes, the project takes into account all 5 of these items that are listed. There's MERV 14 filters, waterproofing, vegetation barrier. There's installation of ventilation and air conditioning HVAC systems in every unit, in intakes or as far away as they possibly can be. So yeah, all of these items are addressed in the project design. It's standard practice, and it's just standard building practice.
Thank you very much.
Any additional questions for either the appellant, applicant, or city staff? Commissioner Nash.
Thank you, Chair. I think I have a question for Mr. Pearson first. And it seems to me that the studies from the VC Air Pollution Control District are backward looking. Because as I look into my crystal ball and I see us transition to an electric vehicle transportation system, it seems to me that emissions from the combustion of hydrocarbon fuels will, if anything, decrease. Will this lead to revised recommendations on how close we can build residential to freeways? And it's probably an opinion as opposed to fact, but I'd be interested in your opinion.
Commissioner Nash, so yes, one way of looking at it would be that, yes, as emissions and from vehicles go down, that proximity to freeways would become less of an issue. But again, would all be circumstantial, I guess. So there's no way to really know for sure, and there's no way to put a timeline on what level emissions would be at any given time.
I think my point being is that we're kind of stuck looking backwards. And that may not be the best indicator of where we are or where we will be in the very near future. I do have a question for Ms. Davis. If she's there.
Yes, I am here.
Hi, is there any characteristic about this parcel that would provide unique habitat for endangered species?
According to our biologist who visited the site and wrote the comments, part of the importance of the site is the fact that it's still there and not yet developed upon, and an array, being surrounded by other development projects, and its proximity to the river. Yes, although there are roads in between, it still provides habitat for special status species that migrate along the river pathway and use nearby land for foraging and other activities.
Okay, thank you for your response. I do have one further comment for you, and that involves the submission of lengthy comment letters the night before a hearing. It is very difficult for a commission where most of the members have day jobs to be able to find the time necessary to read and digest the information provided. Was there a reason why it was the comment letter was so late in coming?
Yes, I do apologize for that, and I fully understand your concern. Unfortunately, given coordinating the experts and getting everyone's comments together came about later than we would have hoped.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think that finishes my comments, Chair Chavez.
Thank you, Commissioner Nash. Vice Chair Revel.
Thank you, Chair. I have comments for each of staff, applicant, and the appellant. I'll start with staff. Given the recent public comments, I see staff's recommendation. Has your degree of your recommendation changed, or is that relevant and you want to stand still by your recommendation?
Vice Chair Rejo, could you clarify what you mean by degree?
Yeah. Are you more or less sure of your recommendation because of the public comments?
Yeah, Vice Chair Rejo, there has been no change to staff's recommendation. We still stand behind the recommendations that we put forward at the director's hearing and the recommendations that we put forward here before the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Person. And then Mr. Rozelle, I usually ask this of previous items. I think it's more significant in this instance. Are there any legal ramifications for postponing this to a future meeting?
At this point in time, you have all the evidence that has been presented. I acknowledge that there was a document dump at the last minute. So guess there is a lot of information presented. But from the legal standpoint, It is the city attorney's office position that the environmental review period ended. The addendum was certified. The time in which they had to challenge it has passed. So in essence, they don't have the ability to reopen it. I also want to mention that this very law firm participated throughout this process. So they were very aware. And in fact, they are the reason that the project got continued, because they raised other issues. So they knew there was an addendum. They knew it was going before the city council. Members of their law firm testified, or their representatives, and they chose not to file an action to challenge the addendum. So it is our position. They had the chance to seek the court intervention with the addendum, and they did not. So their time has passed. So it is, based on that, staff's recommendation remains the same as it was before.
Thank you for that additional information. Could you explain, hopefully simply, your explanation of the difference between substantial and fair? Substantial was said many times by the appellant, and the difference between substantial and fair was mentioned by the applicant, I believe, or somewhere else.
Yes.
Could you just, yeah.
Yes, it's a fair, there's a difference between a substantial evidence and fair argument. A fair argument is a much lower standard. If you can make a fair argument, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily a winning argument, but it's a kind of a good faith argument that there may be issues. For substantial evidence, it means that you have to present, as it implies, a lot of information to back up your position. And in this case, especially given that the addendum was approved by the council just in April and it was not challenged, there is not substantial evidence. There's been changes in the environmental document since that time. So because the appellant in this case failed to challenge the CEQA documents, it's really impossible for them to now say that there's substantial evidence to support their position for the changes in the project from April of 2020. So that is why that they cannot, in my legal opinion, cannot show substantial evidence to overturn what is before you tonight.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure my book definition was similar to your law definition. And one last question. The applicants asserted that the appellants were wrong on the law. Do you believe, or do you agree with that argument?
Short answer, yes. Yes.
Thank you. For the applicant, one question. You mentioned something about 4.8.24 air pollution mitigation, that there were none, or it was already successfully mitigated. If you could just repeat your comment on that.
Yes, again, for the record, Andrew Fogg from Cox, Kessel, Mickelson. In the draft, in the EIR, the original EIR, the page reference is section 4.8-24. It's the last page of the air quality section. And it describes, and this is the way the EIR is formatted consistently. There's a section that describes each of the impacts, goes through everything, and then has a conclusion at the end. The concluding section says unavoidable significant impacts. That's what we're talking about. And the quote is, no unavoidable significant impacts to air quality will result from the River Park project. And that's because, as Mr. Pearson explained, there were a lot of things that were identified as potential issues. There were a number of mitigation measures, all of which are still in effect, and some of which have been updated over the years. With the imposition of those mitigation measures, the air quality impacts will be mitigated to a level that is less than the threshold of significance. You would only have a finding of unavoidable significant impacts if, after the imposition of all feasible mitigation measure, you would still have exceedances of those thresholds. Here you do not.
Thank you for re-explaining that. Appreciate it. And one question for the appellant. You stated that there are 4 special status birds protected by law. I assume you're listening. What would you expect the city or the project to consider to mitigate that? Or is the only mitigation to not build the project to protect them?
Thank you for the question. No, I don't think that the only mitigation is not to build the project. I'm not an expert myself, so I don't have an answer for you on that. I think that's why we want to see that impact analyzed. So then someone with more expertise on that particular subject than I can determine what appropriate mitigation would be.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any additional questions or from any three? I had a couple of questions. Mr. Pearson, in regards to the APCD's, letter, number 3, they talked about the APCD for condition number 113. This is the payment of the TDM, the mitigation fund fee. Can you talk a little bit about that? Is the city charging the appropriate price, or have we not been charging the appropriate prices for that?
So Chair Chavez, so yes, under the original River Park EIR, one of the mitigations was the payment of this fee. That fee has been imposed on River Park projects as they've come through the process, and that fee is updated. I believe it's in accordance with the CPI. So it has been adjusted over the years to kind of keep pace with basically current rates.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll just make note that number 4, that we need to make sure that we change the number in condition 126 to match the new number. Just for clarifications, just to clear up any confusion, addendum number 15 is project specific, correct? Do I have that understanding correct?
Yes, so it was prepared as a project level EIR.
Okay, good. For our appellant, kind of similar to the questions from our vice chair, I guess ultimately where I'm trying to get to is how was it determined that there were sensitive species identified at this site?
I'm sorry, that was directed to me.
Yes.
So we had a biologist visit the site, not on the site, but visit the edge of the site so as not to trespass, and physically observed and these species and took notes, took photographs of some of them. And so that's how it was documented.
Okay. So just based off of photos, it was determined that there were how many out of the number identified?
4 during her site visit, which was not an all-day visit, but during that time she observed 4 special status species.
Okay. Throughout the process for addendum 15, were your group aware of that?
I was actually just looking back. That is news to me. I certainly wasn't involved in that, and I don't see anything on our side, as far as I can tell, that we were involved in that. There are other attorneys at my firm who may know more than I on that, but I don't see anything showing that we were involved at all.
Okay, thank you. For our city staff, just a question in regards to the air quality. It was already mentioned by the applicant team that it would take over, I believe, 900 days, almost 1,000 days for construction to be completed in the process. In regards to mitigation efforts, because there is a senior home, are they having to take any steps in order to mitigate air quality for that property?
So, Chair Chavez, I guess there are air quality mitigation measures with regards to construction. Nothing specific to the Oakmont facility, which is adjacent to it, but the city has kind of standard air quality mitigation measures that it applies to all projects to reduce those air quality impacts that result from construction. And so those conditions or mitigation measures are included in this project.
Thank you. Okay. I have no other questions on that. Is there any additional questions? If not, we'll go ahead and open the public comment for this item. Madam Secretary, just to confirm, we did not have anyone sign up.
We don't have anyone sign up, but I see one person in the waiting room, but they do not have their hands raised.
Okay, so as a courtesy, I'll go ahead and announce that any members of the public wishing to participate on this item virtually, you can view the bottom of the screen for the call-in number, meeting ID, and the passcode. If you're dial-in only, you can press *9 to raise your hand. Desktop, use the raise hand feature.
Okay, so I see that Marcos Albaran raised his hand.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and recognize him for 3 minutes. Mr. Albaran,
Hello, I'm sorry.
you have 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry, this is the first time I've done this. That audio is kind of out sync, so it's sort of getting overlapped. So that might be an issue to look into in the future. So my general thoughts on the wagon wheel development, I think it's a great idea to build more sort of basically just in general apartments in Oxnard, as it has a growing population. Yes, hello? Okay. Oh wait, shoot, sorry, that's the audio looping back in. Is there a way to mute it on the Zoom stream? Hello?
Mr. Albaran, are you watching the meeting as you're speaking?
Oh, I was, I'm sorry. Okay, I had it open in another tab, I'm sorry. Then I opened it up in a Zoom tab and I had to keep it open to get the meeting ID. Should I just continue?
Let's go ahead and just reset his time.
Okay, thank you guys.
Go ahead.
Okay, so in general, I do think it's a good idea to have more of a stronger push for apartments and other sort of population dense developments. I do think the efforts to do this is sort of going to be in vain if we don't focus more on making sort of access routes and making these sort of population dense developments. And if we don't focus on making them also to be car independent, because obviously we've all seen the heat wave going around the globe at this moment. And while I do agree, it is a good idea to sort of preserve the Santa Clara River that is running alongside. I also think it's a good idea that would probably also help with the air quality, to provide more alternative routes for travel around the area, either with like public transit or, in my personal opinion, having like a bike route going along North Ventura Road, sort of expanding that area to make it easier for people to walk. Because I think it's absolutely absurd that someone living directly across from the Whole Foods at the collection would have to travel by car over the North Ventura Freeway. That is honestly just like a huge blockage. And there aren't many good options to sort of work around the Ventura Freeway, but by making it more walkable and expanding sidewalks, adding like dedicated, protected, especially bike lanes, because a lot of the time in Oxnard you'll see bike lanes, but they're not very good. They put the bicyclists in the mix with traffic, and it sort of very much clashes with. Okay, so no drivers ever like driving with bicycles, and obviously bicyclists don't like driving with cars. So it very much puts them at a point where obviously in a collision, bicyclist is going to lose, and they're not going to there's a lot of people that don't survive that. So I think we need to work on making safer routes, which will improve air quality, or safer bike routes, which will improve air quality in the area. And that's kind of it.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you.
All right, just confirm we have no additional speakers online or in person.
Chair, that's correct. No speakers online or in person.
Thank you for that. We'll go ahead and close the public comment. Bring it back to the commission if they have any additional questions or if there are any deliberation comments that they wish to provide. Vice Chair Rejo.
Thank you, Chair. I believe that we should be moving forward with approving, or you know what, I agree with the recommendation put before the Planning Commission, because I believe that we should be going off of 2022, not the 2002, given that there was already numerous times when objections in various manners could have been made since 2002 in regards to this area, whether generalized or specific to this project, could have been done in regards to all, I believe it was 8 categories of concerns. I believe that that they are wrong on the law, and that that we should approve the denial of the appeal. And I look forward to supporting that motion when it's put forward to the body. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions or deliberative comments? Commissioner Meyer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate the time and all of the efforts put forward by our staff, and the time and effort required by the applicant team. There were a lot of confusing points made, and there's many layers to such a complex project like the River Park project. So I think for my part, having that opportunity to get some clarity about all of the questions, concerns that were raised has been very helpful. So I appreciate that, and I feel prepared to make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments or deliberative? Commissioner Dr. Lopez.
Just general comments to Ms. Davis and the appellant. Certainly do appreciate the time, your care and focus with sensitive areas within the city of Oxnard, and certainly advocating for points of concern. I certainly do appreciate the due diligence that staff has undertaken over the last 20 years, and more specifically in the past year with evolving the River Park opened areas and transitioning to addressing certainly an area that we all recognize is of high priority and need, which is our housing stock. I have to concur with Vice Chair Arejo and staff that this may have been on a technicality or the expiration of time to be able to properly appeal, and I think that would certainly be challenged if the appeal was overruled here by us. And so certainly did want to just recognize, if you will, the care, the concern, and the advocacy on both sides, and certainly feel comfortable rendering a vote here once a motion is made. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? I'll just briefly say that an appeal is very challenging. Here's the way that I look at it. To say that there are sensitive species in a particular area is very challenging, especially unless you are actually physically grabbing them and examining them, because there's those cases where you can say something sensitive species and it ends up being something else just because it's at a distance. Air quality, very important thing. All of us up here value the health of our fellow residents. I just feel that the request to appeal the community director's decision is lacking. I don't feel it's a strong argument. And yes, I appreciate the report, and I wish it came in sooner versus being dumped on us this afternoon. And the pictures, great, the pictures are nice, but at the same time, I just don't feel like it was a strong argument. Our city during our last city clerk has made it easier for members of the public or any organization to follow along with any city department for any meetings that come up, any projects that come up, it's available. So for us to get from point A all the way to the end and now have it be challenged, the only question that I have is, where were you during the whole process? So unfortunately, when a motion is put forth, I already have my vote for this item based off of both sides, the applicant and the appellant's arguments, and the information that was provided to us this afternoon. So that would end my comments, and I look to the commission if there's no further comments, that we look for a motion. Vice Chair Rejo.
Thank you, Chair. I move to find the project to be consistent with FEIR number 00.0/03 and subsequent addendums, prepared for the River Park specific plan and therefore exempt from further environmental review pursuant to sections 1516.2 through 1516.4 and 1518.3 of the CEQA guidelines, and adopt a resolution denying the appeal and upholding the CDC approval of the planning and zoning permit number 19-200-16, subject to certain findings and conditions, because the record shows that there is evidence necessary to make all the findings required by Oxnard City Code. And that the condition number 126 will be updated as indicated in the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District number 4.
Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Meyer. So it's been moved and seconded to find the project to be consistent with the final environmental impact report number 00-03 and subsequent addendums prepared for the River Park specific plan, and therefore exempt from further environmental review pursuant to sections 15-162 through 15-164 and 15-183 of the CEQA guidelines, and adopt a resolution denying the appeal and upholding the Community Development Director's approval of planning and zoning permit number 19-200-16 development design review permit subject to certain findings and conditions, because the record shows that there is evidence necessary to make all findings required by Oxnard City Code, and to update condition approval number 126 based off of the APCD's number 4 on their letter. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing and hearing none, Madam Secretary, can we have the roll call, please?
Vice Chair Owejo,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Dr. Lopez,
Aye.
Commissioner Nash,
Aye.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Yes.
Chair Chavez,
Aye.
motion passes.
Thank you. And we'll go ahead and proceed with our agenda. Next item is study sessions and report. Nothing is listed. We'll move to planning commission business. Commissioners, any business to bring before? Vice Chair Rejo.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. As some of you know, I'm involved with a local parliamentary group. The one specifically I'm talking about is the California State Association of Parliamentarians, Southern area. I just wanted to let you all know that I've been reelected as treasurer, and I'm looking forward to using the experiences here and bring it to my organization for further education and vice versa. Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Any additional business? I'll just briefly say that the nomination period for City Council has opened. So if you live in districts 1, 2, and 5, thank you. The nomination period is open. You can call the city clerk's office, set up an appointment to pull papers and go through the entire process. So it's very important to be actively and civically engaged in our city. So there's your opportunity to make decisions. If there's no further business, we'll go ahead and move to our community development staff for updates. Director Adamitis or Manager Pearson?
So only kind of one update. You may have noticed when you came in that there's a sign on the door that the chambers will be under construction for the next month. So the August 4th meeting is anticipated to be canceled at this time. And so we would have the 18th and the September 1st meetings remaining. So we're currently working on identifying an alternative location for those meetings if they are held. So we will communicate to you kind of where we end up having that meeting for those two meetings. And Commissioner Nash?
I have a question if you're done.
And the only other item that I want to mention is there will be another workshop for the Aquatic Center. I believe it's August 1st. Sorry, let me. So I just want to make sure I have the date correct. Yes, August 1st at the for the South Oxnard Aquatic Center, located at 200 East Bard. So if anyone wants to provide comments on the new Aquatic Center, 6 to 7:30 p.m. So that's all the comments that I have at this time.
And thank you, Chair Chavez. If I could ask what the status on the Teal Club specific plan is?
So that one is still currently in process. It most recently went to the Airport Land Use Commission, I believe, about a week or two ago. And so it's currently going through the process. The environmental document has been prepared. Staff is currently going through the response to comments process following the environmental review period, which I believe ended earlier this year. So it's anticipated that once the response comments have been completed, we'd be coming before the Planning Commission sometime at the end of the year.
Thank you for that.
Towards the end of the year.
Great. Any additional questions for Mr. Pearson? I mean, if we don't have a meeting on the 4th, I'll just accept it as a birthday gift to me.
Right.
Director Aramidas, anything?
No additional comments. And as the Planning Commission is aware, in the month of August, there will be no council meetings. So there will be renewed activity in the month of September. So staff will be continuing to push forward on many projects and items that will be coming for this last quarter of the year, if you will. If you can believe that, we're already approaching that part of the year, but it's hard to believe.
Great. All right. Since there's no further business before the commission, and if there's no objection to adjournment, we will be adjourning to I'm going to assume a tentative date of August 4th for our next regular meeting, Thursday, August 4th, 2022. And that would be a tentative date. As always, thank you, Commissioner, staff, for all your hard work. Thank you to the public for their participation. Have a great night and stay safe.